welcome back to Mish Reads. Today we're going to talk about how to read more. So I come to you as someone who has slowly increased my reading throughout the past couple of years. My background, my credentials, if you will, are that I was an avid reader as a kid. I could read, I think I won some sort of competition in elementary school for reading 100 books in a year. And that was pretty standard for me. My family and I, we were always at the library. I was a big fan of the summer reading challenges and programs at our local library. That was my favorite thing. And I would say that lasted pretty much up through the beginning of high school and started tapering off as soon as I started taking more AP classes. And then it completely died in college and during my master's program. And I finally picked back up reading right before COVID. So I had my son in 2019, and then the end of that year, I got my first Kindle as an adult. And then I started reading a little bit more during the pandemic. And pretty much at that point, I started steadily increasing my reading. Now, I want to do just a little tidbit here about you should read as much as you want. Whatever you are hoping to achieve is perfectly perfect for you and valid. I want to be very clear that I do not think that there is any sort of moral superiority attached to the number of books that we read in a year. It's not a competition. It's what makes us happy. And so for me, my sort of goal with this video is to talk about if reading is important to you and you're finding it difficult to get back into reading, or you're finding it difficult to stick to reading, here are some things that I do that really make reading fun and have helped me go from reading 5 books a year to then 30, 60, 100 books a year. And I think that's about my sweet spot. Somewhere between like 80 and 100 is kind of where I see myself sitting. I read 104 books last year, and it was a little bit of a rush there. I felt like I kind of crammed in some extra things to like really try and get my reading goal up to 100. And that's just sort of the headspace I was in at the end of last year. But if you don't be too hard on yourself. If you set a goal, guess what? You have free will. You can go into your app, you can go into your journal, whatever. You can say, just kidding. I actually want to read 10 books this year, not 20. There's so much else to worry about in this world that stressing over the number of books that you read should not be the thing that keeps you from reading, or it should not be something that is bringing you, anxiety or sort of this internalized shame over, oh, I see some people read so many books online. Why can't I do that? So this is just my 2 cents on how to increase your reading if that's something that you want to do. So the first one I would say is try and make it a daily habit and set some small goals that you can achieve. So if you say, I want to get up in the morning and before I get off to work, I want to sit down and read my book for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or before bed, I want to sit down and I want to read my Kindle until I fall asleep, or every single day on my commute, I want to listen to a chapter of an audiobook. You will be so impressed with yourself and you'll be so pleased by how quickly that all adds up. It doesn't matter how fast you read. If you're able to commit to doing it every single day or close to that, you're going to start getting through books. You're going to start finishing books. The next thing that kind of goes along with that for me, incorporating that in sort of my daily routine, is tracking your reading. This, follow the dopamine. For me, this is so fun to see my streaks, how many days I've read in a row, to see, my number of books go up. Every time I get to click, the finished or read on one of the apps, I get just that little hit of dopamine, and it keeps me wanting to read because I know that I get to see my progress. So I'm going to do a little screen recording because I am a recent-ish convert to Storygraph, and I was trying to figure out how to get an accurate pages per day because I love the graphs that you get at the end of the month, and I realized I was not getting an accurate number because I wasn't actually tracking every single day. So I'm going to go ahead and start my screen recording, and then I'll take you into Storygraph and show you how to do it. So we're going to go in. We have Storygraph. I have been listening to this audiobook today. So I'm going to hit this little pencil. We're going to open up, and I just checked in my Libby app. I'm at 80%. So now we see that, and we see, I don't know why my streak is off here, but regardless, this is how you can track your reading in Storygraph. So now we're going to switch over to Fable if you like to use Fable. So we're in here, All the Sinners Bleed, I read today. Now, one thing I will say about Fable that kind of irks me, that I'll have to play around with, I don't think you can retroactively add your days. So if you didn't click this button, you're screwed. You can't count that as a streak. But I think on Storygraph, if you go and you edit the days that you read, I believe you can update your streak and get that retroactively put in there. So anyway, you can hit track progress, and we'll say I'm 80% done here. Now, just from a high level view, I think the graphs and the data on Storygraph are better, but the aesthetics, some people seem to really enjoy more on Fable. So you get, some cool color schemes. You get to see these graphs build as you go. This is where I was talking about, I read on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, but I can't go in there and edit it as far as I'm able to tell. So then you get these spreads and ratings and authors. But what I really enjoy about Storygraph, like I said, is it does have some more detail in their graphs. But doing that every single day really just for me, like I said, gives me that spark, makes it exciting. And then at the end of the month, you can check and see how you're doing on your goals. And you can learn a little bit about yourself too. So for example, I'm a huge audiobook listener, and I know that about myself. But when I actually entered it into Storygraph, I listen to almost 70 to 80% audiobooks. I read on my Kindle every night before bed, and I'm trying to read from my physical TBR. I'm trying to read either in the mornings, but mainly on the weekends is when I read, because I can just sort of park myself in a cozy spot and read and not be disturbed. I mean, as much as you can with 2 small kids, but not working or doing anything like getting out of the house, that kind of thing. But yeah, it was kind of a surprise to see just how much of an audiobook listener I am. So I love all the data. I love getting to see that information. And it's just really fun to see your reading ebb and flow and grow and change as you grow and change. And, I just saw another one of my TikTokers I follow. She, was looking at her wrap up for January, and she was like, well, heck, I guess I'm a romance reader. I always thought my favorite was thriller, but I read a ton of romance. So sometimes there are things that you're doing and you're like, yeah, like obviously I know what books I'm reading, but seeing them all together can kind of, teach you a little bit about yourself. So absolutely love tracking your reading. I think it is such an easy way to give yourself that confidence as you're going along and make you feel accomplished, and you just get to, you get to see yourself achieving your goals. The other thing that I will sort of, go in off of that is audiobooks. I am a huge audiobook listener, and if you haven't tried audiobooks and you think they're not for you, I would say to start with testing them out in Libby, because you can get them for free and then you're not paying for them. If you do want to pay, I would highly, highly recommend Libro FM. You get to pick a local bookshop that your purchases go to support. So I have a local bookshop here in Denver that I support with my purchases. I still kind of use Audible, but I'm phasing myself out of Amazon products. The biggest thing I would recommend with Audible is this last year started using Open Audible. It's a paid software that you can download on your computer that makes it so that you can save your MP3s or MP4s from all the books that you've purchased. So I like that because it just makes me feel like I actually own the things that I pay for. Whereas Libro FM, you buy a book and you immediately can download that file and save it to your computer or hard drive, whatever. And I don't know, just makes me feel I'm better about it. I don't feel like I'm paying for a license to a thing. I'm actually buying a thing. So definitely recommend Libro FM. But anyway, if you think you don't like audiobooks, start with Libby. And what I will say is play with the playback speed. So some people will throw shade about how fast you listen to an audiobook. And I don't mess with that. I think whatever speed you want to listen to is fine. As long as you are having a good time, like whatever, who cares? But what I will say is the goal with the playback speed is not to max out how many books you can read. The goal with the playback speed is to find a speed from the narrator that matches your internal brain speed. So for me, 1x is way too slow. And I would find myself, as someone with ADHD especially, I would find myself drifting off, getting distracted because the narrators felt like they were talking like this. And there's nothing wrong with that. The performances are amazing. I also understand from an accessibility standpoint, you want it to be a certain speed. You want it to err on the slower side so that everyone can understand what you're saying, especially if you're hard of hearing or, all these different things. Maybe you don't speak this language, is not your first language, yada, yada, yada. But for me, my brain speed is about 1.5 to 1.6. And when I listen to books at this speed, my brain doesn't get bored and I don't drift off quite as much. So again, it's not about cranking through books, although it is satisfying to see a 10-hour book, get shorter. I will admit. But it's about finding a speed that matches your brain. And this is so silly, but something I love about Libby, I'm going to do another screen recording, but something I love about Libby is when you're looking at audiobooks, you turn the volume down here, but when you look at the audiobook, so this one doesn't really show it because this is just has a black background, but what Libby will do, let's go to my loans. Let's try Yellowface because it has a very bright cover. When you click on it, it gives you a coordinating background and buttons that will match the book cover. Isn't that so cute? It's so silly, but someone took the time to program this into Libby to just make the user experience that much more fun. And yeah, the first time I noticed it, I was like, oh, how cute. It just makes me want to listen even more. So super fun. I also love in Libby, you can create, tags in Libby. So you go down here and I've only started using this lately, but so here's a tag here called borrowed. This one just makes it automatically. You can look at every single thing that you've borrowed. So a couple times I have borrowed something and then not had time to read it. So that happened with The Game Changer by Lana Ferguson. Also happened with We Used to Live Here. I borrowed it, didn't have time to read it, I returned it early. But now I have a whole list of things I've borrowed, so if I want to scroll through here and see, oh yeah, I do actually want to request that again, you can see that. And then you can build your own tags. So I've only started reading this, or using this, so I have a to-read pile. And yeah, it's just, you can make your own TBR. And you could even say, I had the idea the other day of here's books that were recommended to me from TikTok, or here's books I heard about from YouTube. You can get custom with your tags. So it's very similar to your Goodreads, your Storygraph. You can create these lists for yourself in the app to help you keep track of things you want to read. So I love Libby. I love using my local library. I love getting to keep working towards my reading goal without, continuously spending money and buying books. So highly recommend, go get your library card, do it. Okay. So yeah, listen to audiobooks. And the other thing about audiobooks is, I love listening to them in the car. I like doing my chores with them. I'm actually someone who can listen to an audiobook and work at the same time. So depending on your job, maybe you can test that. I do find myself, if I have to brain on, I pause my audiobook, but then when I go back to some of my more day-to-day stuff, I can turn my audiobook back on. So, just being able to keep myself busy at the same time while I'm listening is just such an easy way to help me reach my reading goal and just keep reading and keep exploring more books. I mean, that's what it's all about. So, the next, I kind of talked about this at the beginning, but the next thing that I recommend is picking up an e-reader. Now, this is a Kindle, but one of the brands I've had my eye on this past year is the brand Books. So I've seen them go viral for their Books Palma. It is a e-reader that's got the paper type screen, but it's the size of a smartphone. So that's kind of cool. But they also have like a Kindle Oasis style. They have like a one that you can write on. They have a color. They've got lots of different ones. And what's really neat about the books is since it runs off of an Android architecture, you can just download whatever app you want, and you can have a web browser. So you can have your Kindle app, a Kobo app, your Libby, your, you could even have your Goodreads and your Storygraph all on your e-reader. You could also have, you can get fan fiction, obviously on the internet. So I'm definitely keeping my eye on that one because I don't love being completely locked into the Amazon, infrastructure. And similarly with Kobo, although I have heard great things about Kobo, you would be buying into just one brand. I don't even know if do they make Nooks anymore? Does Barnes & Noble make Nooks? But yeah, that would be a similar vibe where you then are kind of stuck into the, that one brand. But yeah, definitely recommend having an e-reader. It's so nice for travel, but truly for me, the biggest benefit now is reading before bed because you can turn it on dark mode. You can just relax and get in a couple pages before you go to sleep. I initially got it because I was breastfeeding my son. I was constantly snuggling with him on the couch, and then he would contact nap and I would be on the couch for hours, and there's only so much TV you can watch. So I ended up getting a Kindle with a pop socket, and that way it doesn't matter what I'm doing with my baby arm, I can still read my book. And that's when I really started cranking up my reading, was during that time in my life. And so I don't read quite as much on the Kindle anymore. Like I've been saying, I'm a big audiobook person right now in this season of life, but I still do love having an e-reader. And I think it really does just make it that much easier to stay on track with your goals. And also with Libby, you can send directly to Kindle. Someone maybe who has a Kobo will have to let me know, how do you get Libby books on Kobos, or can you? Obviously, if you were using a Books, you could still say send to Kindle and it would send to your Kindle app on your Books. Although now that I'm saying that out loud, you'd also just have the Libby app on one of those. So yeah, definitely love being able to do that. Some people will check out their Libby books and then turn their Kindles on airplane mode so that they can have them for longer. That's a personal preference if you want to test that out. I am such a goody two shoes. I feel guilty about the next person who's waiting for the book if I'm like taking forever. So that's just me constantly overthinking things, but highly recommend having an e-reader. And just like with anything, these guys are so durable. My last Kindle I got this one last year. The first one I had lasted me, 5 years, and it was still doing great. It just was getting a little bit slow, and I got sucked into this really pretty sage color. But like that black one I gave to my friend, it is still going strong. These e-ink devices are really well made. Seems like they're very, very hardy, and they've just got a really good shelf life. So with that in mind, check your Facebook Marketplace, check eBay. You don't need to spend a bunch of money. I would definitely stay away from spending a lot of money on these, because at the end of the day, it is just an e-ink. There's only so much that you can get. Like you can see, they're all going to have this like refresh rate. It's all going to be about the same type of an experience, and save money where you can. And if this is truly something you want just to increase your reading and accessibility, and if it's not something that you've ever used before, don't go rush out and buy a brand new one. Maybe see if you can get a good deal on one. Yeah, just be smart, Another thing that has been so fun, I've only started doing this in the last year or so, is joining book clubs. So whether that be virtual or in person, whichever, fits your lifestyle. I know I don't have a ton of people in my life who read. I've got 2 friends who read. And so we do have a little book club, but life is crazy, and sometimes, not everyone's able to finish the book at the same time. And so then you don't have anyone to talk about it if, life happens. So I have had fun this last year joining online book clubs. I do the Brady and Rosie Book Talk. They're both lovely people, and they've created a really fun community. But there are also tons of people who use Fable to host book clubs. And I also do the Kristen and Mads Patreon, their book club. But just finding a way to build community around reading can really motivate you to read. If you're like, I want to be able to talk about this with people, I want to watch the live where they talk about it, I want to be in the chat, lots of people are hosting, Discords and things like that for book clubs. finding a group that you can talk about reading with can make all the difference in the world to actually implementing it in your life. So there's so many different ways that you can fit this, this hobby in and truly like make the most of it with what you want it to be. I don't know if that makes sense. But set a goal that feels practical for you and just enjoy the process. Don't get stuck listening to all these people, talking about how many books they've read, and don't let that make you feel bad. Sadly, I think most adults, especially in America, read less than a book a year. So if you're able to do that, then you're beating most adults. So there you go. There's your win. And yeah, I don't know, branch out, try different genres. That is one thing that I really enjoy about audiobook listening is I am able to listen to a lot more genres than I am able to physically read or e-read. And I think it's because it takes just slightly less effort to listen to a book than it does to read it. And I don't say that because I think audiobooks don't count as reading. I will die on that hill. Audiobooks count as reading. But I do think it's slightly easier to push through books that maybe you're not that into because you're not having to sit there and like force yourself to focus on the words, if that makes sense. So I think audiobooks have been a great way for me to also branch out a little bit and try some different genres. And yeah, maybe you think that you only like one type of book, but then you try something and you realize, oh my gosh, I actually love this whole genre and now this whole world is open to me. So however many books you want to read, however much you read now, that's amazing. That's wonderful. And if you want some tips and tricks to maybe read a little bit more, then there you go. Let me know in the comments what you guys like to do to read, what kind of books you read, if you like tracking, if you like using the apps. But yeah, I would just love to chat with you guys and see you in the next one. Bye.